the four historic maps through Ipswich, but I think if I just put them up one by one, they don't say anything about them. Just you look at them for a minute and see whether you find an obvious common element to them. This is the earliest one. Okay. I think there's something clearly fairly evident about that. Just to see what you think that is. That's Speed's map from 1610. This one, which is later again, something again fairly clearly evident and obvious about that plan. The second one, I haven't been able to just find Pennington, which is to hand. That's Overall's map, just slightly later. This is a Victorian map, slightly different scale, just slightly throw you off. But again, the general element to that's significant. Anybody's got any particular thoughts about what that is? What's common to those three? Very clearly. Yeah.
They're all maps from the central business district.
Yes, but is there anything about the pattern of what's shown on those plans that is actually fairly common? Which is it? I'll put another one in, a modern one. That's the central area. Again, is there anything particularly striking about it?
Most of the business and commerce takes place on the waterfront.
Well, that's certainly true, but what I was hoping you might have noticed is that effectively, centre of Ipswich, the old Anglo-Saxon town, is more or less circular. Just get a feel for it there. And
does it all sit north of the river?
I was going to say, there's more north than there is south.
There it is. Start to pick it out there. It's very clear on these. Actually, this is what's driving Ipswich in terms of its general shape. Whoops. See it again here. Now, the other factors which clearly is significant are obviously the river to the south and the dock. So you have more or less the shape of the red dot and the river that goes in there. And one of the reasons why I think Ipswich is the shape it is and it's grown the way it has is obviously this is set in largely in a bowl. There are hills, fairly shallow hills, but hills to the southwest and all around the north and eastern side of the town. And obviously the river and the tidal basin as it was formed one of the principal accesses to Ipswich from the south, and obviously there were accesses from the east and west. And the other significant element of it, which perhaps isn't quite obvious from those plans, which actually drives the shape of Ipswich, is actually Christchurch Park, which is up here, which is 90 acres. What you start to get is opportunities and a problem for Ipswich. One of them is simply that most of the population of Ipswich lives up there, and to some extent there, and there. And I should check that out beforehand. And one of the problems that Ipswich has is, which drives these most of these plans here, is how, when you've got about 70,000 people living over this side, or 70 living on that side, or there or thereabouts, almost nobody living to the north, and let's just deal with that in a minute. You wonder why there's no real development up here. It's all on those sides. How they deal with the town centre, how they cross it, why the area between the park and the town centre is under tremendous pressure from a traffic point of view, and as I'm sure you're aware, how the area between the waterfront and the town centre deals with traffic. And those are key elements that drive the problems of Ipswich. The other fundamental, absolutely one of the most simple things you'd imagine, actually, if you were to draw a cross-section down there, but perhaps a little bit longer going north than I've drawn it. Ipswich is, there's the waterfront down here, and the town centre, and then you go up the hills, and then you get to somewhere like Valley Road, the northern end, that's up here. Okay. And it starts to slope down again. So why do you think it is that there's very little development beyond Valley Road in that direction to the north? Shall I draw something else on them and see where? people start to have a view about this. Everybody, again, any ideas? No?
It's a wet.
Fundamentally, yeah.
Is it because when it rains, the water's going to collect to the top of the hill and rush down?
It means water runs downhill. That's such an obvious and immediate and simple reason. But what it does mean is, in fact, if you're developing anywhere in Ipswich, what actually effectively determines where development takes place is actually what drains are. It's a very simple principle. And no development has almost ever taken place, if you like, on further north in Ipswich, because it was simply easier to connect into all the drains which ran down to the sewage works. Two. One is down here, Office Hull, very, very low lie, and all the development here drains to that, and all the rest of the development in Ipswich, more or less, in these areas, somehow it drains its way down to Cliff Quay, which is the big sewage works there. And to actually develop north of Ipswich, one of the reasons it didn't ever develop was simply because no one wanted to pump what's called foul drainage to some people and sewage to others uphill, pump it uphill and over the hill to a sewage works somewhere in the Westfield area. So those are sort of key elements of what effectively sort of driven development. The straits of the town centre and the ease with which you could develop on fairly straightforward areas of land, and also where the drainage situation was. And the other, just sort of social, historical aspect to this is really that in the 19th century, most of the housing development that took place in Ipswich was housing that was built for rent, and much of the small-scale housing in and around town centre was built for rent. However, because you could only vote if you owned property, there was a movement to effectively encourage more people to be able to vote by enabling them to own their own property. And so in Ipswich, as that was the case in many other places, an organisation called the Freehold Land Society was set up, which was to build houses specifically for people to buy. When they could buy, they could vote. And much of the development that took place on the eastern side of it in the 19th century was on land which was acquired in order to be able to build houses for sale rather than effectively just to rent. The more recent development in Ipswich has really been in the form of large-scale council housing estates in the 1920s, 30s, when very overcrowded areas right in the town centre were cleared, and those took place in the 1930s here, and in the 1950s, 60s and 70s here. It's Chantry. Chantry is about the same size as Stowmarket, really quite surprising in terms of you think about how many people live there in relation to the size of Ipswich as a whole. So Ipswich started in an extremely confined way, spread out slowly over the hills and up the river valley, really, more or less, and then gradually sort of onto the fairly flat plain beyond, I suppose you could describe it as, towards the end of the 19th century, and then to the outskirts in terms of council housing in the 1930s and the 1950s. And that's been accompanied by private development, which is simply filled in the gaps, so to speak, as appropriate. So that's really what I just want to say initially, because I don't think actually talking to you about a great thing about history, which will necessarily inform your views about the geography of it. But I'll fill in as we go on.
Where's Ipswich going? We're at the cusp at the moment between two plan systems. The old plan, the 97 plan, which is this one here, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the new plan under the local development framework system, which the government introduced about a couple of years ago, which was meant to be a much simpler and more streamlined system, but is proving not to be. And we're at the public consultation stage on options for that plan. But looking at what's happened since 1997, this is still the adopted plan, the local plan for the town. There are probably a couple of quite striking things about the general form of the plan here. One is opportunity, and opportunity is always quite a